Dear learners, welcome to the course on Essentials of Financial Management. Here, today's lecture has been devoted to financing of working capital, and here financing of working capital is an important subject, and it has always been the area of interest for all the finance manager, because the working capital, as we know, it is nothing but the capital which is required by the company to discharge day to day operations, should be financed in such a manner that the cost of financing the working capital should always be lesser than the gain accrued from utilizing the working capital. So, here the gain of acquiring the working capital should be more than the cost of acquiring the working capital. So, in this case we have to study and discuss the concept of financing of working capital. What are the different types of working capital finances available to a company? What are the benefits of working capital finance, and when company is going to approach to any institutions or company is going to decide about the method of financing, what should be the approaches of working capital financing? Here the working capital financing refers to the funding used by a business to cover their short term operational needs, such as paying for inventory, paying for wages, and also paying for day to day expenditure. This ensures that a company maintains adequate liquidity to manage their regular activities efficiently without disrupting operations and also maintaining the profitability. So, as we have seen that the discussion on working capital always revolves around the two important criteria. The number one is liquidity and other one is the profitability. So, with proper working capital financing, business can free up cash for investing in new projects and also for meeting the growing demand of the business. So, in this case company has to see that what are the types of working capital finances which is available to any business organization. Working capital finance may include the short term and the long term sources of fund. The short term operational needs can be met out of the trade credit, the sundry creditors, whereas the demand for permanent working capital can be financed using the long term sources like equity share, debenture, and also using the retained earning. Then working capital financing method may rely on the line of credit, overdraft, working capital loan taken from the banks. They can also be a provision of revenue based financing, inventory based financing, and also the receivable financing. So, we can see that there are long term sources for financing the working capital, and also there are certain short term sources available for financing. So, before we actually move to the short term sources, let me give you some idea as when a company can use equity share, debentures, retained earning for financing the working capital. We have seen that there are two types of working capital, one the permanent working capital and the temporary working capital. So, permanent working capital is where company requires a reasonable amount of working capital over a period of time, whereas temporary working capital requirement is based on the seasonal and the cyclical requirement of the business. We know that the equity share is a permanent source of financing, but there are certain disadvantages associated with the equity share, that the company has to share the voting right. Company will have to pay a very high rate of dividend if you compare it with the interest on the bank loan. Similarly, debenture also has some benefits of trading on equity or financial leverage, but they also have the risk of forcing a company into the situation of bankruptcy when the company is not able to pay the interest and also the principal. Retained earning is possible to be used as a source of financing only when company has a good track record of profitability. So, these are the expensive sources can be used for financing the permanent portion of working capital. So, let us see what are the short term sources of finance. This short term sources of working capital finance, the line of credit. No, line of credit is an arrangement whereby a revolving loan which gives access to a fixed amount of funds, and with this fund business can withdraw money within the pre-approved credit limit, and the company has to pay interest only on the amount borrowed. So, once repaid, that amount becomes available for use again, and that is why this is called the revolving arrangement. Like up to a certain limit, company can utilize the fund, and only on the used fund company has to pay the interest. Why it is very advantageous for any company? Because it is flexible. Company can negotiate, company can adjust its uses of fund and can pay the interest only on that amount. This fund can be withdrawn at any point of time, and company is not under any pressure to apply for a loan every time. So, this gives reasonable amount of flexibility to the company for financing the need for raw material, wages, and also for the other kind of day to day operation. But line of credit can also have certain limitation, as there is a limit to the amount one can draw from under this arrangement. Then there may be some extra and hidden fees which company has to bear, and the application procedure is not very simple, and sometime it is taking lot of time. Then another facility which can be used for financing the working capital requirement is known as the overdraft. As the name is suggesting, the business can withdraw money from bank account even if it does not have any balance with the bank, and that is why it is called the overdraft facility. This allows for withdrawal of cash any time. Now, the less paperwork is involved in this process as compared to a situation when the company applies for bank loan. Then overdraft limits are often very low, and if the business has to have major chunk of fund, this facility may not be very useful. As it is giving the right to overdraw the account, it is also charging a very high rate of interest, and most of the time bank may ask for a collateral or for a security when it is giving the overdrawing facility to the business organization. Then working capital loan can also be used for financing purpose. The bank loan is one very important and conventional way of financing the working capital, though the rate of interest is low, but there are certain limitations, as a lot of paperwork needs to be done by the organization, and bank may also ask for the security before it is giving loan to the person or the organization. Then there is another way to finance working capital need. It is called the cash flow loan, where it is granted based on the capacity of a business to generate cash flow in the near future. So, here the cash generating facility becomes a foundation for getting the cash flow loan from the agencies. The revenue based financing is also one of the mechanism by which the funds are given to business to finance working capital, and this RBF arrangement will share a small percentage of company's revenue until the funding plus a flat fee is repaid in full. So, this is a very flexible approach where no set repayment schedule is made. So, company may be free from worry about keeping up with the repayment schedule. It can adjust its EMI and the repayment of principal and the interest as and when company has generated sufficient amount of profitability. And then apart from this, it is also a very quicker and easier way to get the financing. Then inventory financing is also a very popular way of financing the working capital loan. It is a loan or line of credit which can be made available to the business to buy the inventory. And here, instead of using property or any assets as collateral, the inventory that has been purchased by the company would be hypothecated, or this could be kept as security to get the another or the additional loan from the organization. Then receivable financing is also very much similar to the inventory financing, where in this arrangement the business will receive cash based on the accounts receivable. So, account receivable is actually is being used as a underlying asset upon which the receivable financing is made available, and this can also come in the form of factoring and also in the form of discounting. What is receivable factoring? Actually, it is nothing but an arrangement where the business will sell its outstanding receivable, and this is sold to a company known as a factor, and after the sale of receivable, the factoring company will give 70 to 90% of the amount immediately to the organization selling the accounts receivable, and remaining amount after deducting a factor fee or other fee will be paid upon maturity of the receivable. So, this is having two immediate advantage. Number one, the fund is made available immediately, and secondly, the remaining amount can be paid only when the receivables are collected from the customers. The another related mechanism for obtaining the financing based on the receivable is known as the receivable discounting, whereas companies' account receivables are used as collateral to borrow money. The loan amount usually ranges again between 80 to 95% of the receivable value, and once the maturity of the loan has been attained, the company will be repaying the amount along with the interest and also fee to the lender. So, in the first arrangement, the receivables are sold out to the third party known as a factor, whereas in receivable discounting it is an arrangement whereby the some amount of receivable value is received with some kind of discounting on it. Now, it is a time to see what are the benefits of working capital financing. So, this can be possible that company has generated sufficient amount of profits, and by using its profit, it is always discharging its day to day operation, it is meeting its day to day operation. But if the company is entering into an arrangement whereby it is getting the funds from outside, it would improve the cash flow position of the company. So, company will not be under any stress as where from to make the arrangement of financing the working capital. It is also giving greater amount of flexibility, so that the otherwise available fund can be used to invest in a good projects and good profitable projects. Company can also increase its competitiveness by covering its short term expenditure, and this would also result in ensuring a very strong position, strong financial position of the company in the market, and always becoming ahead of the competitor. The another advantage of having working capital financing arrangement is the ability to take advantage of discount. So, when company has sufficient amount of working capital either in hand or at bank, it would allow a company to take advantage of discount. What is advantage of discount? Like whenever there is some offer, like if the company is going for bulk purchase, it may avail a certain percentage of discount like 1% or 2%. So, company can avail this facility only when it has the fund immediately available to acquire the material from the market. So, discount may immediately reduce the cost of acquiring the inventory, and it would also improve the profitability. Now, there are three important principles of working capital management that needs to be discussed. Number one, the principle of optimization, principle of investment in working capital, and also the principle of suitability. Let us see what is the principle of optimization. And the optimization is the word which actually establishes the trade off between the cost and the the benefit of any phenomena. So, here when we follow the principle of optimization, it has to be seen that the incremental gain of financing the working capital and investing the working capital is more than the cost of acquiring the working capital or cost of investing in the working capital. Now, the principle of investment in working capital suggests that companies should always increase investment in all component of working capital like raw material, work in progress, finished goods, sundry debtors, and also the cash, as long as the increase in equity is taking place. So, that means there has to be a parity between the increase in equity and also the increase in the different component of the working capital. And this is because the fixed asset will not become active unless until there is a sufficient amount of working capital available with the fund. Now, the third principle, which is actually highlighting the approaches to working capital financing, refers to a situation where it is to be considered that each asset should be offset with a financing instrument of the same approximate maturity. That means, if the assets are having a maturity period of say 5 years or 10 years, then the instrument, the financing instrument with which they are being acquired should also have the maturity of similar duration. That is the principle of suitability, and this is giving rise to the discussion on the financing of working capital. Now, let us see what are the different approaches of working capital financing. Here, based on the financing instrument being used for financing the permanent working capital and the temporary working capital, we can see there can be 3 approaches to financing a working capital requirement. Number 1 is the conservative approach, second is the aggressive approach, and third is the balanced approach or the matching approach of financing. Let us see what is the conservative approach of financing the working capital. Under this approach, a company finances all its permanent working capital needs and also a significant portion of its temporary working capital needs with long term sources of financing such as equity, retained earning and long term debt. That means, not only the fixed assets, but the part of working capital, a part of current asset which is permanent in nature is financed using the long term sources of fund. This is a low risk because every time the long term sources would be available in the company, but this is a low return strategy. Why it is low return strategy? Because the long term sources are relatively costlier as compared to short term sources. So, if the company is using long term sources to finance the working capital, then naturally it is incurring higher operational cost which may have the adverse impact on the profitability position. So, that is the advantage and disadvantage, that they reduces the risk of illiquidity and gives the certainty of uninterrupted production process, but it is a mechanism which is often sounds good only during the boom condition of economy. Now, disadvantage of this method can be discussed as the in terms of lower profitability due to high financing cost, because as we have just discussed, long term funds are generally more expensive as compared to short term. So, let us now understand what happens under the conservative approach with the help of this figure. Actually, this line is showing the working capital which is relatively permanent. This is the core working capital and this is the portion of temporary working capital, but which is relatively permanent in nature. So, the whole portion, that means the long term assets and a portion of current asset will be financed using the long term funds. This is called the conservative approach of financing the permanent and temporary working capital. I hope the graph has made it more clear as what should be the level of financing through the long term sources, and only this portion is going to be financed using the short term fund, right. So, this was the conservative approach. Now, let us see what is aggressive approach. As the name is suggesting here, company is going to increase profitability even at the cost of liquidity, and what it does, this company may finance its temporary working capital needs with short term sources and part of its permanent working capital also with short term debt. So, here as it is suggesting, it is an aggressive approach. Why it is done? It is in order to increase the profitability of the company, because short term fund is being used to finance the temporary working capital needs as well as the permanent working capital needs. So, it will be using relatively cheaper source of fund for financing the permanent working capital. So, higher profitability though ensured, but this may be at the cost of liquidity problem that may arise in future. So, this situation is good only for tight money conditions, when the condition of economy is not good, it is passing through a recession. So, at that time company should preserve its long term sources for making investment in good projects where it cannot use the short term sources of fund. Graphically we can see that the long term sources are being used to fund the long term assets, but a permanent working capital is also being financed using the short term financing. So, as a result it would increase the problem of illiquidity, though the profitability of the company may improve, and that was the purpose of going for aggressive way of financing the working capital. And as we have seen that there are two extreme, conservative and the aggressive approach of financing. The balanced or the matching approach is a way whereby the limitations of both the approaches can be overcome, and in this case company will finance its permanent working capital needs with long term financing and temporary working capital needs with short term financing. So, actually it is trying to ensure a parity between the maturity period of long term sources of fund and long term investment, and that is how company is trying to reduce the risk in the company, and along with this minimization of risk, company is going to produce a reasonable amount of profitability compared to the conservative approach. Why this approach is not very easy to follow in practice? Because it requires careful matching of asset and liability maturity. So, every time company need to constantly monitor what is the time when the when an asset is getting liquidated. That means monitoring the maturity period of asset and liability becomes very important job of the finance manager, and this, even if it is done with careful planning, the certain amount of is going to be there, and it is really difficult to practice in reality. This is the presentation of balanced approach, where we can see all the temporary working capital, whether it is permanent in nature or temporary, is going to be financed through short term sources, and only the working capital which is permanent is going to be financed by long term funds. Now, we have seen the different methods of financing working capital, its approaches where the different scenario of liquidity and profitability has been discussed. Let us see if there is any challenge in financing of permanent working capital exist or not. So, here the first and foremost challenge comes in a way that how to determine that what is the permanent part of working capital and what is the temporary working part of capital, because sometime a particular portion of working capital which we were considering as permanent may fluctuate over a period of time. So, that is how we cannot say with 100% of certainty that it is the permanent and this is the temporary working capital. Now, ascertaining the timing of asset liquidation, just now we have discussed how to ascertain the time of asset and liability maturity. It is very difficult task. So, here if management can predict like when a particular asset is going to get liquidated, then only it can predict the working capital requirement, like how much fund is internally available and how much fund is to be generated from outside sources. And finally, the attitude of management also plays a very important part in deciding the way the working capital can be financed. What is this attitude of management towards risk? Here sometimes the management may be risk averter or sometimes the management may be the risk taker. So, if the management they are the risk taker, then naturally they are going to follow the aggressive approach of financing the working capital, because in that case it is using the short term sources to finance the permanent portion of working capital and it would increase the profitability. However, it may compromise with the liquidity. So, if the management is risk averter, then naturally they would not follow the aggressive, rather they would go for the conservative approach, ensuring reasonable amount of liquidity. Maybe they are going to compromise with the profitability of the company. So, these are the challenges in financing the working capital requirement of any business organization. Though it is important for every company to predict the working capital requirement with great amount of certainty, but since the real life situation may vary from the theoretical discussion, it is not very easy to always have a equilibrium or a trade off between the liquidity and the phenomena, which is the two important pillars of the working capital management. So, with this we have concluded the discussion on the financing of working capital. So, with this we have come to the end on the deliberation on the working capital financing. I hope you have understood all the concept thoroughly and you do not have any problem, but still if you have any problem we are eager to solve all the queries. Thank you very much.